Hollywood has always looked glamorous on the surface, but what if the truth behind it is far darker than anyone imagined? In this shocking story, Corey Feldman speaks out about secrets the industry tried to keep hidden for years. But it doesn't stop there. One disturbing real-life incident shakes everything even further.
That the number one problem in Hollywood was and is and always will be pedophilia. That's the biggest problem for children in this industry.
The casting couch even applies to children.
Oh yeah, not in the same way. It's all done under the radar.
Nobody talks about pedophilia.
It's the big secret.
When a daughter named Cleo turns against her own mother in a violent act no one saw coming. What really drives these moments? And what is Hollywood hiding behind closed doors? Stay with us, because this story goes deeper than you think. Corey Feldman was born on July 16, 1971, in California's San Fernando Valley, a place where dreams often begin, but not always gently. His father, Bob Feldman, was chasing success in music, while his young mother, Sheila Feldman, was left to raise him largely on her own. Bob's path in the industry carried a touch of illusion. As part of the band The Strangeloves, he helped create the song I Want Candy, later a hit, but the group built its image on fabricated stories, pretending to be wealthy Australian outsiders. Even in success, there was a sense that things weren't quite what they seemed. At home, Sheila began to see her son not just as a child, but as an opportunity. By the age of 3, Corey was already being pushed into auditions. She even altered his appearance, bleaching his hair to fit a vision she had in mind. His first step into the spotlight came through a McDonald's commercial, and from that moment on, the cameras never really turned away. Before he was even old enough to understand fame, Corey Feldman had already appeared in more than 100 commercials. It wasn't long before television roles and films followed. From the outside, it might have looked like a dream childhood, bright lights, early success, endless opportunity, but behind the scenes, it told a far darker story. Home was not a place of comfort. His mother pushed relentlessly, demanding more work, more auditions, more success. Her words cut deep, often mocking his appearance with cruel insults. As he grew older, the emotional strain only worsened. Nights brought no relief, only unsettling routines, like being woken up so acne treatments could be harshly applied without care. Feldman would later speak of something even more troubling, claims of physical abuse, punishment given without reason, as if discipline itself had no logic. His mother denied it all, reshaping the narrative in later years. The truth blurred into a painful, he said, she said. What remains clear is this: he was a child caught in an adult world, working endlessly with little say in his own life. Outside Hollywood, it might have been called exploitation. Inside it, success masked everything, and somehow, through it all, his career kept rising, even as his childhood quietly slipped away. One of the films that pushed Corey Feldman into the spotlight was Friday the 13th. The final chapter. Hardly a typical project for someone so young. By then, he already carried years of experience, which sometimes made him seem difficult on set. That attitude didn't sit well with Ted White, the man behind the terrifying Jason Voorhees. White's frustration simmered quietly until it surfaced during a key scene. The moment called for Jason to crash through a window and grab Feldman's character. But when the cameras rolled, nothing happened at first. Feldman hesitated, thinking the scene had been cut, until suddenly, White lunged forward. The delay was intentional, designed to shake him, and it worked. The fear captured on screen wasn't acting, it was real. Off camera, life grew even more unsettling. Concerned that his son was maturing too quickly, Feldman's father brought in a man named John Grissom to act as a constant companion. At first, he seemed harmless, even charming, always knowing how to make Corey laugh. But with time, something about him felt off, as though he had studied Corey too closely, mirroring him in ways that became deeply uncomfortable. Realizing how little control he truly had, Feldman made a drastic decision. He sought independence from both his parents. Emancipation promised freedom, the chance to choose his own roles and manage his own earnings. But that hope quickly unraveled. When he filed, his fortune was said to be around $1 million. By the time the process was complete, almost all of it had vanished, leaving behind only a fraction. The betrayal cut deep. Yet even in the middle of that chaos, opportunity lingered. Steven Spielberg had once considered him for a role in E.T. the Extraterrestrial, though the part disappeared during rewrites. It could have been a defining moment, one that slipped quietly away. But Spielberg, known for his rare kindness in an unforgiving industry, didn't forget him. He later helped Feldman land a role in Gremlins, where director Joe Dante praised him as one of the finest young actors of his time. It was a strange contrast. Moments of generosity shining through an otherwise harsh reality. For Feldman, success kept arriving, but it often came wrapped in experiences no child should have to endure. By the mid-1980s, Corey Feldman seemed unstoppable. After Gremlins, he stepped back into horror with Friday the 13th, A New Beginning, while also landing a role in the adventure classic The Goonies. It was during auditions for that film that he first crossed paths with Corey Haim, a meeting that would spark one of Hollywood's most complicated young friendships. Feldman won the part, but the connection they formed would shape both their lives in ways no one could have predicted. Ironically, The Goonies also closed a door. Plans had been forming to evolve his Friday the 13th character into something darker, possibly even the next villain, but scheduling conflicts and shifting decisions behind the scenes meant that opportunity quietly slipped away. Then came Stand By Me, based on a haunting story by Stephen King. Feldman's portrayal of Teddy, a boy burdened by a troubled father, felt uncomfortably close to his own reality. It wasn't just acting, it was reflection. Soon after, he reunited with Haim in The Lost Boys. While the older cast embraced the nightlife, the two teenagers found their own escape in simple moments. Arcades, movies, and laughter. For a brief time, they experienced something rare in their lives, a sense of normalcy, but that fragile balance didn't last. Behind the scenes, Feldman's struggles were catching up with him. One day on set, director Joel Schumacher noticed something was off. Fatigue, erratic behavior, the unmistakable signs of a young star burning too fast. At just 16, Feldman was already entangled in habits far beyond his years. The illusion shattered quickly, and Schumacher made a harsh decision, removing him from the set. It was a turning point, one where success and self-destruction began to blur, and the cost of growing up too fast became impossible to ignore. Desperate not to lose everything, Corey Feldman pleaded for another chance on The Lost Boys. Promising to pull himself together, he managed to convince Joel Schumacher to give him one more shot. For a while, he held it together, just long enough to finish the film, but the cracks beneath the surface were already there. Soon after, he reunited with Corey Haim for License to Drive. It was around this time that the media coined them the Two Coreys, painting a picture of youthful success and unstoppable momentum. From the outside, they seemed to have it all: fame, money, and a future wide open. But behind that image, something far darker was unfolding. Years earlier, both had begun attending gatherings known as the Alfie Soda Pop Club, a place supposedly designed as a safe, alcohol-free hangout for young actors. Familiar faces like Alyssa Milano and Alfonso Ribeiro were part of that scene, but the promise of safety didn't match reality. With little to no parental oversight, the environment became deeply troubling. Feldman would later describe it as a place where boundaries blurred and danger quietly lingered. At first, he felt special being personally invited and even chauffeured to these events, but over time, unease replaced excitement. He later alleged that the very people running the gatherings had darker intentions, and that vulnerable young actors were being exposed to exploitation. His revelations years later would cast a long shadow over what had once been dismissed as harmless teenage fun. Amid all of this, Feldman's struggles with substance use deepened, yet his career continued moving forward. In 1989, he appeared alongside Tom Hanks in The Burbs, where he also connected with Carrie Fisher. She understood the pressures of fame all too well and tried to offer guidance. For a moment, there was a sense that someone truly saw what he was going through, but even that support couldn't fully pull him back. By the end of the decade, Feldman and Haim had become icons of teen stardom, earning top salaries and dominating the box office. They were, in many ways, the faces of an era. But as the 1980s faded into memory, so did the illusion of control. The 1990s arrived with a harsher spotlight, one that no longer celebrated their success but exposed their struggles. Headlines began to change tone, and the story that had once felt like a dream started to unravel in full view of the world. When authorities charged Corey Feldman with possession, the shift was jarring. The bright-faced kid from the Goonies was no longer a symbol of youthful adventure. He was an adult in crisis. Realizing how far things had spiraled, he entered rehab, where he spent nearly a year trying to rebuild himself. When he emerged, there was a sense of quiet determination. He began working with troubled youth, perhaps seeing reflections of his younger self, and attempted to reshape his own future beyond the shadow of child stardom. But reinvention proved difficult. Film roles became less defining, like his appearance in Tales from the Crypt Presence, Bordello of Blood, a far cry from the projects that once made him a household name. Searching for something more meaningful, he turned to the stage, taking a risk with an off-Broadway satire inspired by Fatal Attraction, originally starring Glenn Close and Michael Douglas. It was an unusual choice, blending humor with self-awareness, and while critics found it curious, they also saw glimpses of someone willing to laugh at his own past. Still, the pull of fame and survival led him to reality television. Alongside Corey Haim, he stepped into the spotlight once again in The Surreal Life, allowing cameras to capture a life that had already been shaped too much by public view. During this time, he met Susie Sprague and impulsively proposed. Their televised wedding blurred the line between performance and reality. Yet, against expectations, the marriage endured for years and brought a son into their lives, Zen Scott Feldman. For a moment, it felt like stability might finally take hold. But the past was never far behind. In his memoir, Choreography, Feldman began to reveal the deeper scars of his childhood. He spoke of manipulation, substance exposure, and abuse, stories that painted a far darker picture of Hollywood than most were willing to accept. Initially, he concealed identities, bound by legal limitations. But later, during a public interview, he named the man he claimed had harmed him, someone who had once been trusted, even welcomed into his life as a guardian figure. The revelation was chilling, made worse by the discovery that this individual had a criminal past involving minors, and had even evaded legal obligations after release. Pain seemed to echo through every chapter of his story. Even his connection to Michael Jackson drew him into public scrutiny during renewed allegations surrounding Neverland Ranch. Feldman initially defended Jackson, insisting nothing inappropriate had ever happened during his time there. He suggested that attention was being diverted away from the real perpetrators. Yet, in a surprising turn, he later withdrew his defense, leaving many questioning what had changed, or what remained unspoken. By then, it was clear that Feldman's life had become a constant negotiation between truth and survival. Each revelation uncovered more complexity, more contradictions, and more pain. Beneath the headlines and shifting narratives was a man still trying to make sense of a childhood that had never truly been his own, and an industry that had taken far more than it ever gave back. Corey Feldman later introduced Corey's Angels as more than just a music project. He described it as a way to guide young women who felt lost, offering them direction and opportunity. The idea sounded noble, even hopeful, but the execution raised eyebrows. Feldman framed it as a full-scale creative platform, something meant to nurture talent and rebuild lives. Yet, behind the scenes, the picture became increasingly complicated. Over time, several former members stepped forward with concerns about his behavior, casting a shadow over his intentions. The situation grew more troubling given that Feldman had aligned himself with efforts to combat harassment in the entertainment industry. As criticism mounted, he quietly stepped away from that role, leaving behind more questions than answers. Still determined to tell his story, Feldman moved forward with a long-promised documentary. He never secured the massive funding he once insisted he needed, but he pressed on anyway. When the film's release finally arrived, anticipation was high. Viewers paid to watch, expecting long-awaited revelations, but the moment was thrown into chaos when Feldman claimed hackers were interfering with the broadcast, disrupting access for those watching from home. Despite the confusion and frustration, he chose to continue with the live screening. When the documentary finally delivered its claims, the reaction was immediate and divided. Among the names he revealed was Charlie Sheen, an accusation that was quickly denied. Unexpectedly, Judy Haim also rejected the story, deepening the controversy. Feldman, in turn, pushed back, insisting forces were trying to silence him. When Corey Feldman finally revealed names, many realized they had heard most of them before. He confirmed identities he had previously hinted at, including figures like Alfie Hoffman and Dominic Brascia. Even the accusation involving Charlie Sheen had already circulated publicly. For many, the moment that was supposed to deliver a shocking truth instead felt strangely familiar, almost incomplete. It left lingering questions. Were there still untold names, held back by fear? Or had the story become tangled in the need for attention and validation? The answers never fully came. Life, however, moved forward. Feldman endured the backlash and continued working, mostly in smaller, often horror-focused projects. He found stability, at least on the surface, with his third wife, Courtney Ann Mitchell, once part of his own creative circle. In recent years, he has even lent his voice to projects like those of tank-standing Buffalo, perhaps recognizing something familiar in another troubled past. With Feldman, there's always a sense of duality, of someone still searching for meaning, still trying to turn a complicated life into something that feels like redemption.